I'm going to report today on the lawsuit against Fox News filed by Dominion Voting Machines, which people on all sides agree is an important battle over the First Amendment. Now that the litigation is at a later stage and with the company's agreement, I'll look at both sides and give you my take. That's coming up a little later in the program. Journalist Matt Taibbi, who worked on some of the Twitter files, is now calling his former mainstream media colleagues spineless, corrupt, amoral, and an F word I can't say on TV. Elon Musk, who provided the internal documents to journalists, is objecting to a serious attack on the Constitution by a federal agency. What I'm talking about, as the Wall Street Journal reported, is the Federal Trade Commission asking Twitter to, quote, identify all journalists granted access to the company's records. And a House committee report says there is no logical reason why the FTC needs every single internal Twitter communication about Elon Musk. At a hearing chaired by Jim Jordan the other day, Taibbi used slightly more diplomatic language.
Effectively, news media became an arm of a state-sponsored thought policing system.
There were angry clashes, especially between Jordan and ranking Democrat Stacey Plaskett.
The Republicans have brought in two of Elon Musk's public scribes to release cherry-picked, out-of-context emails and screenshots designed to promote his chosen narrative, Elon Musk's chosen narrative.
The first FTC letter to Twitter after the first set of Twitter files, the very first question was, who are the journalists you're talking to? And you guys don't care. You don't care.
Democratic Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia had this tense exchange with Taibbi.
When was the first time that Mr. Musk approached you about writing the Twitter files?
I can't give it to you, unfortunately, because this is a question of sourcing, and I don't give up. I'm a journalist.
Do you consider Mr. Musk to be the direct source of all this?
No, now you're trying to get me to say that he is the source.
I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Molly Hemingway, editor-in-chief of The Federalist. And in Connecticut, Harold Ford, the former Democratic congressman. Both are Fox News contributors. Molly, what should we make of the fact that a federal agency is demanding the names of journalists who dealt with Elon Musk or Twitter? 12 different letters, because I find it really troubling.
You know, we've had so much news and information coming out about how Twitter was working with federal agencies as part of a big censorship scheme. And so there is interest that the government should have in how privacy has been violated, how the First Amendment has been violated. But instead of digging into any of those things, they're going after Twitter, and they're going after Elon Musk for exposing some of this nefarious activity. It's deeply alarming, and it really speaks to how powerful our bureaucratic administrative state is. These are not elected representatives, but they're doing more damage again to the First Amendment.
Harold, the FTC says it's doing this in order to protect the privacy of users, despite the big layoffs by Musk based on a $150 million court settlement last year. But doesn't dragging journalists into it feel like overreach?
It does. First off, good morning and happy Sunday. I think what the FTC has done, it's now been over a decade of trying to ensure that Twitter devotes adequate resources to protecting the privacy of its users. I think that's one bucket, and that's a legitimate pursuit on the part of the FTC. But when it comes to demanding the names of journalists, that's a much taller burden. And I'm not, in the reporting that I've read and things that I've seen, I don't know of any justification for that. It would have to be a tall order, and they certainly, at least in the public record, have not met that burden at all.
Molly, this is a Biden administration agency chaired by Democrat Lena Khan. The House subcommittee report says not only is there no logical reason why the FTC needs the identity of these journalists, but no logical reason why the FTC needs every single internal Twitter communication about Elon Musk, except I guess it looks like the administration doesn't like Elon Musk very much. He's not, you know, he says he's a little bit to the right, but he's not obviously a liberal Democrat.
It looks retaliatory for the information that has come out. You know, Twitter is just one of the many social media companies that controls so much of public discourse and debate. We have gone through an era where public debate has been suppressed, where very important news and information has been censored. And what these Twitter files showed was that social media companies themselves are working with, and in some cases even being paid by federal taxpayer dollars, to take part in the censorship of American thought and discourse. This is a massive scandal. it is important not just for the Hill to be looking into it, but also journalists. But it's terrifying to see how government agencies themselves are working to suppress further discussion of this. I mean, that's a very intimidating thing to do, to say, tell us which journalists you're talking to.
Yeah, and you know, the press used to be in favor of free speech, and now increasingly seems to want government control, or at least government influence over these big social media platforms. Harold, I don't quite get why Matt Taibbi, who writes at Substack, got into this back and forth about whether Musk was the unnamed source, because I think Twitter's been pretty open about Musk providing this information to Taibbi, Barry Weiss, and other journalists. But the Democrats seem determined to prove that this award-winning former Rolling Stone writer was unethical or trying to make a lot of money off of this. And even one of the Democrats called him a so-called journalist.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was not the finest hour if there was an effort. If the effort was to try to understand what the motivation of Mr. Taibbi was in this, and what he uncovered that concerns him so much and he found so disconcerting, I probably would have asked the questions a little differently than they were asked. But I do think it's important to separate the two things here. This data, the privacy data, or I should say the concerns that we have around individual privacy in terms of data that each of us who use Twitter, I think that is a legitimate pursuit of the FTC, and they should, and they obviously have had an arrangement with Twitter around this and finding them, and they had to pay that back. But this effort here, again, I think it distracts from what is clearly the legitimate and identifiably legitimate responsibility of the FTC for them now to be querying in this space without full explanation as to why and to what and how they believe this is part of or will aid their investigation in terms of protecting our data and our privacy. That is unclear to me, and until they prove that, I think they will continue to get these questions.
Well, you're the only one here who actually has asked questions at congressional hearings, and I'm sure you would have asked them differently. But, you know, Molly, they were so determined to make this into a big payday for Matt Taibbi, and he said, I haven't gotten paid anything for all the work I've done on the Twitter files, including travel, and that he had hired a team to help him research this stuff because it's complicated and it's a lot of man hours. And so he said it was a wash at the best, rather than a gold mine.
Well, regardless of whether it had been something that made money or not,
I mean,
it's a very legitimate news story. And it's something that all journalists should be taking the information that came out from the Twitter files and moving it forward. You know, I have a colleague at the Federalist who's used some of this information to dig deeper into the disinformation, you know, industrial complex that's trying to suppress news and information. Other reporters have too, but not, you know, it's not led to the kind of major media reporting that you would hope for. It's also, you know, it just seems like people on the left are happy with the censorship regime, and so they want to suppress any discussion of how it operates and why it's a problem.
Right. And it's not like these journalists are carrying out Musk's agenda. They look at the files, and sometimes they say the request for suppression or deletion of a tweet came from the Biden administration, sometimes from the Trump White House, and sometimes from campaigns. Let me turn now to something that's gotten a massive amount of coverage. I'll come back to you, Molly. New York Times, as you know, with a story based on foreign name sources saying Donald Trump is likely to face criminal charges in the Stormy Daniels case. This is the Manhattan District Attorney's probe of a hush money payment to the former porn star. And the key thing here is the report that Donald Trump himself has been offered a chance to testify this week before this grand jury, which often, not necessarily always, but often is a signal that an indictment could be coming. What will be the media reaction if Trump actually gets indicted on the least serious accusation against him?
I mean, they seem to be happy no matter what they can do to go after this person. You had the New York Attorney General run for office claiming like all she wanted to do was indict him for something, which is not how it should work in our system of government and our system of law.
And she brought a civil case against his business.
Right. Yeah. And so they've just been going after him for all sorts of things, whether it's the Manhattan DA. So I think reporters should care more about, you know, the legitimacy of this entire operation, whether it's good to be so political in prosecution, but they'll probably just celebrate if it does happen.
I don't know whether Harold will be celebrating, but I do want to read the comments that Donald Trump made, among others. I did absolutely nothing wrong. I never had an affair with Stormy Daniels, nor would I have wanted to have an affair with Stormy Daniels. He always throws that in. This is a political witch hunt trying to take down the leading candidate in the Republican Party. So he's saying it's all political because he's running for president again.
Well, your question from the outset was how will the media react to this? And we've seen some reaction advance, including from people who've been critical or constructively critical of President former President Trump when he was president and since. And their thinking on this is the point you made, Howie, at the outset, which is this case here seems like, of the 3 or 4 that are out there, seems to be the weakest of the 4. And there are concerns that if you're serious about going after President Trump for some of the more serious things, that this here could distract from that. So I'll be curious to see how the media writes about it. In fairness to the district attorney in New York, Mr. Bragg, his office did secure a conviction against the Trump organization. So I think they have some momentum there. But we'll have to wait and see. And I know the Georgia case is one that people think has more legs, and even the special counsel case looking into the documents and into the president's behavior after the election. Some think that has even more legs.
Well,
we'll see how this affects.
Just to remind people who have forgotten or tuned out or never tuned in, this is a $130,000 payment with the help of the National Enquirer that went to Stormy Daniels in the final weeks of the 2016 campaign so that she would not go public with her allegation, which the former president denies, about having had this affair. And the check was actually written by Michael Cohen, now a fierce critic of his former boss, but at the time a Trump fixer. And so let's say this happens. It seems to me the harder the media hit Trump, the more that the MAGA base is going to rally around him and say this is an unfair and maybe even dumb prosecution.
Because this man has been persecuted by every single, local, state, and federal law enforcement agency. I mean, the example just now of the classified documents, we all can see the difference between how Merrick Garland handled it with Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. I mean, there's not one standard of justice that we're under right now, and everyone can see it. And everyone also understands they're going after this person not because they think this is a crime. They're going after him because they find him disruptive. The media have hurt feelings over it. Law enforcement has hurt feelings over how disruptive he is. But that's not what we should do in this country.
Hurt feelings?
Well, he's very disruptive, and they don't handle it well. But that is not a legitimate reason to go after someone.
There has been, in fairness, I'll let you in a second, Harold. I just want to throw this on the table. There have been some legitimate media skepticism. The New York Times itself said a conviction is far from assured. Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to lying, so he's not the world's most credible witness. And falsifying business records in New York is usually a misdemeanor. Your turn.
Right. I was only, Molly, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. Howie asked how the media would react. I was just giving a sense, and you still have these 2 other investigations. We can have another debate about whether the legitimacy of those and the efficacy of those investigations. I just think the media, at least what I've read thus far, thinks that this case, that what Mr. Bragg is likely to bring, or what we think is coming, is the weakest. And if you believe the other 2 or 3 are stronger, if you lead with the weakest? And your point, Molly, I was only trying to talk about how the media is going to react to this.
Yeah, well, we've seen a lot of media reaction, and I do think there'll be some people jumping up and down because we have been through 6 years of, wait till this investigation, wait till Bob Mueller, wait till this. Not saying that this is not going to happen, but I am saying that it might even help Donald Trump in his campaign. He says even if he gets charged, he's not dropping out. All right, let me get a break ahead, a look at that much publicized lawsuit against Fox News. But when we come back, Ron DeSantis and Gavin Newsom taking on giant corporations in their states. And let's just say the coverage is strikingly different.